Is daar genoeg kos in die wêreld vir almal? Wat van Suid-Afrika en Suider-Afrika? Welkom by Prontuit. Van 'n bak botter, mieliemeel tot hoender. Kospryse het die afgelope tyd die hoogte ingeskiet. Leidens verslae deur Statistieke Suid-Afrika het die verbruikersprysinflasie, wat meet hoe kossoorte en dienste se pryse oor die tydperk verskil, relatief hoog gebly in Suid-Afrika met 'n gemiddeld van bo die 4.5%. Dit terwyl 'n rekordlaagtepunt van 2.1% behaal is tydens die vlak 5 inperking verlede jaar. Dit beteken dat alle Suid-Afrikaners nou meer betaal vir minder kos en toenemend meer mense honger gaan slaap. Dit terwyl Suid-Afrika volgens kenners voedselseker is. Om hieroor te gesels sluit Wandile Sihlobo, hoofekonoom van die Agri-besigheidskamer Agbiz, en professor Ferdi Meyer, uitvoerende direkteur van die Buro vir voedsel en landboubeleid digitaal vanaand by my aan. Hi Wandile, hallo Ferdi. So food security is something that everybody's talking about at the moment, but of course we all know that it is completely inseparable from agriculture. And there are quite a few discrepancies if you look at this subject. So, Wandile, I'm just going to start with you shortly. Just give us your take on the state of food security, firstly.
Yeah, I think we will have in a South Africa context to look at it, food security in terms of its layers, because Kabas, when you talk about food security, you're really meaning the affordability, availability, and also to say on the nutrition side of the food. And in South Africa, looking at it in all of those three horizons, I would say at a national level, we are pretty much doing well as a country. We are food secure. But where the challenge comes in is when you begin to say at a household level, how are we doing? We have over 6 million South Africans that go to bed hungry, and those numbers have pretty much increased since the pandemic started. And I guess that then goes back to the diagnosis to say what's causing that. Is it the lack of food, the affordability issue, or the fact that many folks are just out of work? And I think it's the latter.
Ferdi, jy het baie oor te sê, die diagnose, maar voordat jy vir ons ook die diagnose gee en dan nou 'n bietjie meer analiseer wat Wandile gesê het in terme van wat voedselsekuriteit dan nou nie heeltemal so sekuur laat lyk nie, gee net gou vir ons jou idee van die stand van landbou.
Ja, ek dink Kabous die belangrike punt altyd weet as 'n mens weer eens Wandile het gepraat van die nasionale vlak van hoe word voedselsekuriteit gemeet? En landbou het uitstekend gedoen in hierdie COVID-periode, was dit die enigste sektor wat regtig noemenswaardig gegroei het. Trouwens, ons het rekord oeste gehad, ons het regtig oorvloed van produk geproduseer en kon uitvoer, en ook teen baie goeie pryse kon uitvoer. En dit sluit dan aan by Wandile se punt wat hy maak, is op 'n hoë vlak, op 'n nasionale vlak, is ons voedsel, het ons voedselsekuriteit in terme van die volumekoste wat ons produseer, maar dit gaan eintlik oor die bekostigbaarheid daarvan, en dan skakel dit eintlik aan by, het ek geld om iets te kan koop? Met ander woorde, ek sou argumenteer dat ons voedselinflasie eintlik heeltemal binne in lyn is met wat ons internasionaal sien. Trouwens is ons aan die laer kant, as 'n mens na van ons ander ontwikkelende lande soos Brasilië en selfs van ons Afrika-state kyk, is ons eintlik baie goed in lyn wat voedselinflasie betref.
Yes, so Wandile, if we look at the fact that it's people that actually just can't afford food because of their circumstance, that is something that is going to have to, well, obviously be turned around, which is, I mean, of course, it's about job opportunities, etc. The interesting thing is that a lot of these job opportunities come from the agricultural sector. Is there growth where that is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, Kabas, I agree with you to say dealing with food security in South Africa is not only an agricultural question, but rather more of a socio-economic policy approach that one does need, really, to say, how do you spark employment? And to your point, agriculture has its position, and obviously it could create employment depending that certain policy interventions are being done. Ferdi and the colleagues at BFEP, for example, have been working on what is called the Agricultural Master Plan. If that, for example, is implemented by both business and private sector, it's one of such policy interventions where I think it could lead to some increased activity and perhaps job opportunities in agriculture. But looking broadly, though, at an affordability issue in South Africa, I mean, we've seen food prices rising at a relatively faster pace over the past few months, but not so much about the issues that are happening domestically, but the global factors that have been driving up food price inflation. But if you look through now to say over the next coming months, is there going to be some bit of a relief? Again, I would direct you back to the BFEP baseline publication. And if you look at the forecast for food price inflation there, it does show that towards the end of the year, prices will be rising at a relatively softer pace, which means that in terms of affordability, things will get better. But I think the comprehensive approach depends on how does South Africa boost growth and boost employment. And agriculture has its place, but also other sectors of the economy.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was wanting to ask Ferdi, what do we need from government, Ferdi?
I think that's a very good question, and Wandile, I think your piece this week that you published summarized it very nicely, taking us back to the principles that we put also into the National Development Plan, and which still remains one of the key founding documents in terms of principles of what agriculture can contribute towards the national economy. And I think we can be very clear in the terms of the contribution in the rural economies, and that's where agriculture has a huge role to play. And just coming down into policies is really trying to get a lot of this underutilized land and huge skills, a skill base, a capital that can be unlocked to really invest in these rural areas under a certain policy environment. And one of those factors obviously is access to land. In other words, having a secure tenure and different forms of tenure, and Wandile can also allude to some of those different forms and shapes that it could take. That's a critical factor. Investment in infrastructure in these rural areas, and then really a public-private partnership where you have public sector and private sector working together to actually drive some of these investments. And then just linking this to what Wandile was referring to in terms of the agricultural master plan, that's really the idea, is to get some of these very targeted interventions going, say, what can we do in very specific value chains? And there's a lot of opportunity out there. As I've mentioned, idle irrigation schemes can be added to underutilized land, where we just carefully have to consider we are a water scarce country, and still we have around about 50,000 hectares of idle irrigation schemes, where we can really have, where there is infrastructure, we need to get the water going, we need to get farmers on the ground, carefully selected, have the right beneficiaries in place, and actually have a policy or investment-friendly policy environment to drive this growth in the agriculture sector.
Nou ja, daar's baie potensiaal, dit moet net ontsluit word. Maar is nou eers tyd vir handelsnuus. Bly ingeskakel.